Did Hollywood kill Jóhann Jóhannsson? Sorry, it's a bit clickbaity, but it is interesting in a roundabout way to consider whether this man got into an environment that was so stressful, so high pressure, and at times so
cutthroat.
The highs were high, the lows were low. Yeah, cutthroat. That maybe it got the best of him in some ways.
Hey folks, welcome to the Unsung Podcast. My name is Mark. I am joined by Chris, or otherwise known as Derek.
Sorry, Bruce and Derek couldn't be here this week.
Hang on, let me start that again. Welcome to the Bruce and Derek Show. Hey! Yes.
Those t-shirts are flying off the shelves, by the way.
The Virtue, the e-shelves.
The Bruce and Derek. Get your early signed merch, by the way. Is it some kind of criminal offence to sell signed merch if you're signing in a fake persona?
I don't think.
No, just ask David Bowie.
Yeah, David Bowie.
Amongst many other things.
Elton John. It's not his real name.
He's not here.
It's not his real name.
I thought you were expecting me to answer there.
It's not his real name.
No, it's not me.
It's not his real name. Slash, you know.
It's not his real name. Wait a minute, that's not his real name slash... It could be,
slash,
or it's slash the guitar.
Yeah.
Right, okay, this is a problem.
Yeah.
I don't know, is this a good start to a podcast or a bad one?
It's a really bad one.
It's a real start
It's
to a
a real-
podcast, and that's
really
what the audience
messy.
want.
Yes, you're joining us today in our spiritual and literal home of
It's not my literal home, I've got a bed.
the podcast home.
Yeah.
It is the variety bar, it is No Mean Radio.
It is.
And thank you for having us in this lovely space.
Sean and Gail, the proprietors.
Come on down here for a nice beer, they're doing some tabletop gaming tonight, which is pretty fucking
Yeah,
cool.
I saw that on the way in.
Yeah, they do some quizzes. I think they've got a Simpson quiz coming up, which is going to be pretty
Tabletop
cool.
gaming / canvassing for the Green Party.
You know, all of it's here. It's all here. It's all
It
here.
has the same look to it, doesn't it?
So yes, please come to this pub. It's great, and we love this studio. So thanks for supporting us.
Nothing wrong with the Green Party, by the way. Glasgow is, after all, dear green place.
Dear Green Place, eh?
Yeah.
Smooth.
Aye, it's really hot outside, so we decided we'd sit in this dungeon again.
Yeah.
See?
It's actually quite temperate in here.
Well,
now.
yeah, I know, but we're missing out on some vitamin D. That doesn't happen very often in Scotland, folks. I
It
don't know
does
how
not.
many are familiar with this. I know we've got listeners in countries that are constantly baked at 35 degrees centigrade, but like it just doesn't happen that often in Glasgow. So we decided we'd hunker in a bunker.
Yeah, 15 degrees, taps off.
Everybody else is naked outside. Like, honestly, 15 degrees, folk are ripping themselves out of their shirts and stuff like that. It's wild up there.
They are. But let's get down to business. Christopher.
A country that isn't quite so hot is Iceland.
Iceland.
And that's why we've got this nice cool blue and white aesthetic that's going on in here. I just want to get this out ahead of time. Caveat, apology, national sensibilities. We're going to horribly mispronounce many words and names in the Icelandic language today. Don't take it personally. Mark, I did wonder if it would be less offensive if you tried to pronounce them in Danish.
I don't think so. And also, I don't think you can.
It is a different country.
It's a totally different
but
language.
you know how it goes when you're like generalising.
We made the mistake about a year ago of calling Finland a Scandinavian country. Let's not do the
That's
same.
right.
Let's not do the same thing here.
Yeah, Nordic.
Although I think, no, I'm not even going to voice that thought. Right, let's just move on.
That was a whole thing.
That was a whole thing.
Remember that going to school for that.
Aye.
So this week we are going to cover a fella.
Mm-hmm.
A fella. Well, wait a minute. So this is coming out on May the 4th.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mark.
Star Wars Day.
May the 4th.
May the 4th be with you. Yeah.
Just sounds like you've got a lisp, doesn't it?
Yeah. May the 4th be with you. May the 4th be with you.
Talking about great sci-fi.
Yeah.
This week.
This
We're
week.
going to cover a man who has had his hand in at least one or two great sci-fis with mixed fortunes. Jóhann Jóhannsson.
Yes.
I hope that's approximately how his name's pronounced. Icelandic, born in Reykjavik.
Yep.
A composer, no longer with us as of 2018. We'll go into a little bit of the circumstances surrounding his death later in the podcast. Somebody I've been really fascinated with since, I think it was during lockdown. I dabbled with it a bit, And during lockdown, remember we did like a couple of mixtape episodes during lockdown, and one of them was like the apocalyptic mixtape, and I think I put him on it with something from the record we're going to cover today, which is Orphée from 2016. And ever since then, I just got more and more into him and noticed him more in films that I'd seen that he was behind the soundtrack of, and I didn't really realise that, and just started to sense that this guy was just consistently really, really good. I'd just take more notice of him. And I think also he kind of came to our attention when we did like the Arvo Part episode a bit more. It was like, all right, yeah, there is some really good neoclassical music out there. He would probably reject that tag, but I think it's a shorthand for what we're talking about today. Classical music delivered in a modern style that often incorporates modern instruments. Jóhann Jóhannsson, as much as he does have solo albums, inverted commas, he has really become known for his soundtracks, his soundtracking work. Mark, you familiar with him before I suggested him?
Yeah, I mean, Mandy is one of the great one of the best films I think I've seen over the last 5 or 6 years.
It's a great film. It's a great soundtrack. I didn't know he'd done it.
Yeah,
until quite a bit after.
It's also very wild, that soundtrack, compared to some of the other ones, because it's very electronic. It's very heavily electronic
so
as well.
The film.
Yeah,
I mean, no spoilers, but yeah.
Arrival, Sicario, some Villeneuve compositions. We'll talk about how he did the Blade Runner 2049 soundtrack, which then got rejected by the studio.
So that was my first real encounter with Jóhann Jóhannsson, albeit from a distance, because one of the bands I'm in, roundabout way, one of our songs was sort of like being discussed in relation to Blade Runner 2049, which was incredibly exciting at the time, as you can imagine. Not guaranteed by any means, but it was certainly in the conversation. And then suddenly it wasn't, and we were like, what's going on? And basically the whole scoring situation, soundtrack situation for Blade Runner 2049 completely changed almost overnight, to the detriment of Jóhann Jóhannsson. We will parse this in great detail, but at that point, I think in my head I kind of came to sort of self-pityingly associate our dropping out of that conversation with his dropping out of that soundtrack, and and I guess that was the first time the guy was really truly on my radar. But yeah, who is Jóhann Jóhannsson? So he was born in the 19th of September 1969, 2 years younger than Kurt Cobain.
Whoa.
That's become one of my metrics now. When I'm looking at the dates of musicians, I'm like, gee, he's younger than Kurt Cobain as well. He died on the 9th of February 2018. Died at the age of 48 in Berlin. The German media stated at the time the toxicology report indicated that a lethal combination of cocaine and flu medication was likely the cause of death. So Jóhann Jóhannsson learned piano and trombone initially, but then gave them up in school, or at least for a time, and he started a band called Daisy Hill Puppy Farm.
That's right, yeah.
That resonate with you? You recognise that from anything?
Don't recognise the name, but I do know that Steve Albini was a fan.
Yeah, so, well, Daisy Hill Puppy Farm, first, is where Snoopy was adopted from in the Peanuts cartoons. Wow. Big Charlie Brown fan here. So. So it was kind of like a shoegaze band, like really scuzzy shoegaze, like My Bloody Valentine, bits of kind of Husker Du or Husker Du. Jóhann Jóhannsson, I'm going to call him JJ, was on guitar and vocals. They did a couple of really well received John Peel sessions, and as you say, they actually received a fan letter from Steve Albini.
As you do.
Which, by the way, Steve Albini was already quite famous at that point, so that's actually pretty cool. He went on to play with a couple of other groups in Iceland. In fact, a few other groups, one called Ham.
Ham, yes.
And one called Unun, or Unun. In 1999, and this is quite crucial, I think, in his development, he co-founded the think tank Kitchen Motors. I don't understand the name, the etymology of that name, but Kitchen Motors, the remit was to nurture cross-genre collaboration within Icelandic music. So, you know, classical music mixing with metal, mixing with electronica, and you can really immediately see how this is sort of fed into his future work. Not just that, the other people, the co-founders as well, are very similar. In terms of labels, his early stuff came out on a label called Touch, which, by the way, is not Touch Music or Touch Records. It's just called Touch. It's an esteemed UK label, the home of a guy called Carl Michael von Hauswolf.
Oh, yeah.
Remember him from our Anna von Hauswolf episode, who, by the way, is touring soon. And also somebody called, goodness me, I'm so sorry in advance for this, but Hildur Guðnadóttir. From about 2006, he started working periodically with some really cool indie imprints. He worked with 4AD, he worked with Fat Cat Records, who were very hip for a while. And that's sort of on brand, I think, for him, in terms of reflecting where he came from, you know, having been in the kind of indie scene, but also in terms of like his kind of cross-genre appeal. In 2016, he signed with a very prestigious label called Deutsche Grammophon, a famous imprint of Universal Music that we've talked about in the show before.
I think that came up in the Orphée episode, didn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So they were originally associated with like a plethora of like proper classical classics. At the time he was asked when he signed for them, do you now consider yourself a classical composer? And he said, I'm not a classical composer and I'm not a neoclassical composer. I'm just a composer writing music. From the 1960s, though, Deutsche Grammophon had diversified away from just doing classical stuff, and they'd started releasing less conventional, I would say even at times experimental material. As you say, we spoke about them in Arvo Pärt. We spoke about them in Erik Satie as well. They're also associated with Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, Philip Glass, Max Richter, Tori Amos was on them for a time, Vangelis was on them, Johnny Greenwood was on them, and, oh hello again, Hildur Guðnadóttir.
It's interesting that that's not the first time that Johnny Greenwood's come up in this podcast, because we've been dancing around Radiohead for a long time. But I'm also kind of struck by how, you know, he shares company with like really esteemed composers like Philip Glass and Max Richter, who I would say are clearly a huge influence on his sound. You know, there's a Max Richter record I heard recently because it was actually recommended by one of the guys. It was like one of those Pitchfork videos talking about their favourite albums ever. Yeah. And one of the guys in Joyce Manor of all bands was talking about how Max Richter records, the blue record with the covered, it's got a blue book. I can't remember the name of it. But I remember listening to it and thinking that's really, it's got Tilda Swinton narrates a few tracks on it. It's pretty cool.
Well, she's going to come back up in this conversation as well.
So I would say there's a lot of similarities sonically.
Also, since we've mentioned her already, I want to take a very slight tangent here. Hildur Guðnadóttir, and she's going to get mentioned more in this episode as well. So I'd like to use this to relate a cautionary tale from personal experience. Okay, so on the 28th of February this year, at 7:01 in the evening, I got a message on Messenger, the Facebook app. I'm not proud of it, but it's essential for certain things. Hello, friend.
Hello, friend.
That's what it said, right? Followed by, this is Hildur Guðnadóttir. I'm finally on Facebook, and you are welcome to my new Facebook page. And then a little page emoji.
Okay.
It's like, that's nice. How do I know that name? Now, at this point, I hadn't started researching this episode. I was like, I was just out of the blue, like, Hildur Guðnadóttir. That's familiar. So then I kind of remember, like, wait a minute. So is this not the bird that worked with like Sun and Throbbing Gristle and Mum? Does like a bunch of classical stuff, but she's like, in fact, she was on the cover of like Classical Music magazine, and she was also on the cover of the Wire magazine. So she's like cool, sort of like straddling different genres. I'm like, Hildur Guðnadóttir, what's she writing to me, right? So on the 28th of February, 39 minutes later, I get a message that says, how are you doing? How was your day going? Hope you are doing well. No punctuation. God, she's feeling chatty. At this point, though, I think I can safely say this is easily the most interested that a world famous cellist and composer has ever been in I think it was a Tuesday. Oh, no, it was a weekend. It was a weekend. I specifically remember it was a weekend because I was like, you think she'd be busy on a Saturday, right? So on the 13th of March, and you might notice that 2 weeks have passed, at 18 minutes past 2 in the afternoon, I would suggest quite an angry message from Hildur Guðnadóttir saying, in life, we make time for the things and people that are important to us. I guess I am not of any importance to you. That's why you have chosen to ignore my message of friendship. I'm like, fucking hell, Hildur.
How dare fuck's sake.
Dial it down. Now, I was actually just momentarily, genuinely doubting myself here. I was like, did I meet her somewhere? Maybe, just via friends, like maybe we've been out and it's like, not that happens all the time, but you know what I mean? Then I noticed that her profile picture was a crude cropping of her own album cover. It's like, that seems remarkably gauche for if it's the real Hildur Guðnadóttir. But anyway, I decided to reply because she just played a very, very highly publicised show at the Barbican in London. And I just said, how was the Barbican?
Tremendous.
I assumed she would have been keen to discuss it, especially seeing as she had nothing else going on a Saturday night. Alas, there was no response, Matt. No response. Presumably just either too humble or, maybe more likely, too offended.
Or I would pause it even more likely, fake.
Too offended, as you say. That profile is gone now, and I can only assume that she probably grew disillusioned with Facebook as a result of my coldness. And who can blame her? And I regret it now. And I want to reach out. If Hildur is listening to this show because she knows that we're covering her pal Jóhann, Hildur, I'm sorry, hen. I didn't mean to blank you. I was just busy. And frankly, I've got an on-off relationship with Facebook, as this podcast attests to. So if I caused any offence, I apologise. Right? You've got my number. Well, you've got my profile. Get me back on there. We'll catch up. I'll be fine. Right? So,
but not fake.
And just remember, folks, right? If a random Scandinavian, I think she is Scandinavian. If a random Scandinavian celebrity starts up a profile with 16 followers who all seem to be West African and gets in touch, then be nice, because world famous cellists are people too.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
Now that is my personal experience cautionary tale that is relevant to this episode.
That's roughly around the same time that your account got hacked by any chance.
This was just there. This
just
is
literally like
this is fresh.
Like weeks ago.
This is raw.
Weeks ago.
She's probably still seething. You'll see it in her performances if you go and see her in concert. Yeah, that added edge. That was me. So
nice.
Anyway, turning back to Jóhann, his solo career. Now, his first solo album came out in 2002. Mark, I believe you focused primarily on his solo work.
I did, yes.
Rather than so much of the scoring work.
It's a sprawling catalogue, shall we say.
This is where the butchering of the language will really go up a notch here. So, Englaborn?
Well, I'm going to go Englaborn.
Born?
Yeah.
Okay. So, 2002, it was actually reissued in 2007 with a bunch of extras. It was designed to accompany a play of the same name. It's conceptually classical instruments processed through digital software and filters and things. It's brooding. It's really mature for a first release. It's got some brilliant cello pieces in it.
It really does.
But I think it's not as exhilarating or as affecting as some of his other works.
Oh yeah, I mean, if it was written for a play, right? So you can it's got that kind of feel to it where it's kind of sprawling and expansive because it feels also a bit incidental.
Yeah,
I think he said that he used the digital filters on stringed pieces to create bittersweet miniatures, apparently.
Bittersweet miniatures?
Yes,
Sounds like something you'd tan at your Francis.
But I know Pitchfork gave it 8.9, which is pretty good.
Pitchfork didn't know fuck all about fuck all based on their ratings of Jóhann Jóhannsson stuff, by the way. They are all over the map on this one.
I thought it was pretty cool. I take your point. It is quite...
Oh, it's cool, but it's not a nearly a 9 by Pitchfork standards when you consider some of his later stuff gets like 6 point something. And you're like, anyway, 2004, quite interesting. Now, I don't know how to pronounce this.
I'm lost here, mate. So it
says dis, but the I's got an accent on it. I don't know what that equates to in your language. Dis? I don't know. Anyway, neoclassical, I'm going to say it, and how he combines traditional orchestration with electronics and some contemporary music. I mean, sometimes,
it's a soundtrack, isn't it, this one?
Yeah, it's a soundtrack to like an Icelandic comedy film. It basically sometimes even goes as far as being like krautrock or electropop. It's at points, I would say, between Sparkle Horse and Stereolab.
Whoa.
That's how far it veers into like indie territory. It's not my bag really as a release, but it's a very interesting meeting of kind of his very varied musical tastes,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So I think he was trying to find his lane. I kind of get that impression from it. It's a bit far out there, you know, but it's not bad at all.
Yeah, I mean that kind of stuff harkens back to, I guess, originally to the kind of music he started playing in the first place, right? So
Exactly.
it's kind of moving between two different worlds.
And at that point,
you know?
that was actually still quite fresh to him. So yeah. The next one that comes out is even harder. I mean, Vir du Legu Forsetar? I don't know. Anyway, big swelling ambient classical stuff. This one actually does. I think it's in 4 movements that are all subdivided.
Well, that's not by design. It's supposed to be an hour-long continuous piece, but it was broken up for the record, basically.
Yeah.
And on Spotify is really interesting because it's broken down into even further into much smaller pieces as well.
It does very little for me, really, this one, other than summon image. To me, it sounds like it's trying to be the soundtrack to a blockbuster movie, and it feels a bit heartless.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the motifs in it kind of recur quite often. You know, I think that the soundtrack to a blockbuster movie does make sense. I get that.
Aye, but it doesn't have the intimacy. Like, it's weird because for something that sounds like it's trying to pull at the heartstrings, as I say, I feel like it lacks a bit of heart. It feels a wee bit forced. It didn't really do a lot for me.
So I believe that this particular record was actually influenced by the literary entropy that's found in Thomas Pynchon novels.
Goodness me, that was a pretentious sentence.
Yeah, so he kind of early in his life he decided
literary entropy.
Yeah, so he took apparently when he was younger he took a detour away from music to go and study literature at university.
This is now officially Radio 4.
Yeah, so like he'd always been very kind of drawn to trying to weave like literature references into his music in ways that it was in any kind of way that he could, you know, and that's really interesting because when he was clearly, it appears like he started learning trumpet and piano at 11, and he seemed to have like an aptitude for music, but he decided just to bin it and study literature instead at university, and then he came back to music afterwards, obviously. So I guess this is probably his way of trying to resolve those two disparate threads in his life.
It feels a bit forced. I like that's maybe a crass way to put it. But it just doesn't draw me in at all. Unlike the next record, which in 2006 came out on 4ED, so he's officially cool now. It was called IBM 1401, a user's manual, as in the computer.
Aye, so his dad was an IBM engineer.
Absolutely, he was, and he worked on the IBM 1401, which was a data processing system that arrived in Iceland in 1964. And basically, at that time, keeping computers like that going required knowing about ball bearings and motor oil as much as it required
punch cards and shit like that.
Electronics, yeah. Now, his dad was also a musician and had figured out a way to use the machine and use the machine's memory, so it emitted electromagnetic waves in a pattern that could be picked up by a radio receiver. So the 1401 basically got retired from use in 1971, but his dad sort of saw it off in a kind of affectionate way by playing and recording some of the melodies that he'd composed on it. Yeah,
and he incorporated the reel-to-reel recordings in this, which is a really, really nice thing.
And he began to develop from those melodies. So he incorporated them, but he also used the actual patterns and fleshed it out into this. It was initially a dance piece, so it was to accompany like human dance with a choreographer called, I think it's Erna Ómarsdóttir, which was later expanded into an album with a full orchestra.
Yeah. I mean, 60-piece orchestra.
60-piece orchestra. It's
crazy.
Huge, man. And see, honestly, given what sounds like quite a novel premise in the terms, like it almost sounds like quite a kitsch premise, this is an absolutely gorgeous piece of work.
It's a very good piece of work.
It's arguably more moving than the album I've chosen, Orphée. I hadn't really listened to it in detail prior, but I was really struck, especially by the melancholia around it. I mean, it's called IBM 1401, a user's manual, and it's proper moving.
Well, it's one of the first computers to come to Iceland, you know, and I think there's clearly that part of him, like nostalgia, you know, the melancholy of like these old machines dying and him trying to weld it to this wider narrative around like his musical style, you know. One of my favourite things about it was the fact that it does have like, it's called a user's manual, and it does actually have like spoken words parts in it, which is like explaining how it works,
talking about how the computer works,
which is
the printer. There's a big bit about a printer,
yeah, which is just it's just a lovely little bit of texture in the music, but it makes it really, really personal.
Yeah, it does. And I think he really finds his feet, he finds his groove, he finds his own sort of rhythm on that record. Because as I say, the one before it felt too forced, whereas that one feels it's beautiful.
Yeah.
He followed it in 2008 by Fordlandia. Really nice concept behind this one. So this is JJ's own words. So one of the two main threads running through this is the idea of failed utopia as represented by the Fordlandia title. It's the story of the rubber plantation that Henry Ford established in the Amazon in the 1920s, and his dreams of creating an idealized American town in the middle of the jungle, complete with white picket fences, hamburgers, and alcohol prohibition.
Yeah, I mean, apparently this is part of a planned trilogy. So the last record, the user manual, the IBM 1401, and then this one was the second entry in that trilogy. I don't know what the third one was supposed to be, if it would ever come to pass, but that's a really nice idea,
It's interesting as well, by the way, as an addendum, that the project, like Ford's project, which was designed to sort of save money on the rubber for tyres, failed because the workers rioted because of the terrible conditions they were living in.
Which is, capitalism, baby. But I think, again, this feels like it's another step up in terms of composition. It's probably properly classical at this point, It's
rich. It's a very rich piece of composition. I have to say, in that richness, I found it way less moving than the precursor. But it's very technically accomplished.
Yeah, you can see that he's starting to really grow into himself in terms of what he can do compositionally, and the scope of the work that he can do, which lends itself really well to doing soundtrack work, right? Because you get a much broader understanding of how you can move a person using all the instruments at your disposal. Also quite interesting that he decides at this point to move away from the scattering of electronica that he'd been putting on his other records. I guess you could technically call the reel-to-reel recordings that are in the last record electronica. But obviously that comes back in as a big feature.
That's kind of found sound field recording,
But electronics are definitely a big part of the record we're going to talk about soon. And are obviously used in some of his soundtrack work as well.
Yeah. So if there's anything in the interim, do flag me down here, but I want to just jump ahead to the Gold Dust EP from 2021.
Okay.
Because, I mean, there's a number of soundtracks and quasi-soundtracks in the interim here, and I probably will touch on some that you're going to have comment on, but the Gold Dust EP is various unused bits of music. They clearly came out posthumously, and it's heavily hinted to have been taken, at least in large part, from the work of Blade Runner 2049.
Okay.
The music that didn't get released. And it's a really, really interesting listen. If you go on YouTube and you want to hear some of the set to Blade Runner graphics, for example, you can find it. In terms of the soundtracks, there's various contributions here stemming all the way back to 2000. But the DIS, whatever, was the first one in 2004. He did a couple of prominent Icelandic TV shows in 2007. Prominent in Iceland, I would assume. And then in 2009, a record came out, and it's titled "And in the Endless Pause There Came the Sound of Bees." That it's actually the soundtrack to a short animated film called Varmints from 2008.
That's right, yeah.
This is one of his nicest works.
It's very good.
It's deeply moving. It's got these huge swelling arrangements again with the City of Prague Philharmonic Orchestra, some beautiful soprano vocal work in it. I've never seen the music set to the film that it originally was intended for, but absolutely smashes it at points in this recording.
Yeah, it's a really moving kind of piece of work, and it feels as though some of his best work seems as though it has this really personal feel. And you get that from this record as well.
Yeah. Now his breakthrough in soundtracking came in 2013 with the film Prisoners. Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal.
That's a really good film.
It's a great film.
Is this when he moved to Berlin, or was this when he moved to Copenhagen? Because he moved to Copenhagen, then he moved to Berlin.
Good question.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure. He certainly wasn't in LA at this point, though. So we'll talk a bit about how he met with Denis Villeneuve, right? Because what then happened was he then did Sicario, the next one by Villeneuve in 2015, which was Oscar nominated, and he then did Arrival in 2016, the sci-fi film we were alluding to at the start here. All Villeneuve, His manager, a guy called Tim Hussam, described how he was originally really lucky to bump into Jóhann Jóhannsson. They were introduced at a party, I think, and he'd heard of him somehow, and he was just really happy to meet him. And he just got dropped into the conversation that he'd started a management agency, and Jóhann Jóhannsson seemed really interested, ended up working with him, which Tim was stoked about that. So he went back to LA, and he says, quote, I immediately started sending his music around. People were like, whoa. As soon as I got him an agent, Dennis called about scoring Prisoners. Dennis loved Jóhann's records. After that, it was clear he should be making music for film and TV. And that became, for a time, a very, very good creative relationship. Just slight deviation here before we go back into that a little bit, because we're about to talk about Blade Runner. But Theory of Everything came out in 2015 as well, same year as Sicario, and that was a huge moment for him. It's arguably a career high, actually.
He won a Golden Globe for it.
Yeah, he won a Golden Globe. It was Oscar nominated for it as well, for a film that could have been really quite dry, if you think about it. You know, James Marsh, the director, describes feeling really lucky to convince Jóhann Jóhannsson to take part, because he loved the soundtrack to Prisoners. I think he had worked in part in Prisoners. He was like involved in the production of it, and he used that to sort of get a chance to talk to Jóhann, and immediately was just like, I'm doing this thing myself, would you be interested? And they teamed up in it. He does recall, though, during the production or during the music writing, asking him to take a slightly more positive tone in his music. Theory of Everything obviously has its sadness to it, but it's also at times quite hopeful.
Yeah.
And the success of the film and the accolades, as I say, I think were, at least on paper, a career highlight for him. I don't think it was a creative high for him, but I think it was a sort of recognition high.
Yeah.
And I guess from that point he was quite sought after, you know. He was also included in what became like a who's who of cool music, that show, the OA, in 2015. And then came 2017, we'll call it the year that wasn't, at least for Jóhann Jóhannsson. So Blade Runner 2049.
Hang on a sec, you're missing one thing.
Oh.
Mother by Darren Aronofsky.
Oh, we're going to come back to Mother.
Yeah, that's a good story. It's a good story.
It is a very good story. Yeah. So that's kind of folded in here, because Mother happened 2017. The same year. Yeah. So Blade Runner 2049, JJ, Jóhann Jóhannsson, developed a strong kind of professional and creative relationship with Denis Villeneuve. He'd done those 3 films, all of which are, I think, objectively really good
Very
films.
good films.
I mean, what's the best of them? I know folk would say Arrival. I would probably say Prisoners in terms of repeat views. I love that film.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sicario's, out of the 3 of them, Sicario's the one I haven't returned to.
See, the thing is, Sicario is the one that gets the most critical acclaim, I think. It's a great film.
It's a great film,
But Prisoners is more fun.
I prefer Arrival, I think, just because it's such a pure sci-fi film.
Yeah, it is.
And the sense of, like, it has the awe, you know, which a lot of the best sci-fi has.
It's got that grounding in science of contact as well, you know, like films like that pay deference to the physicists watching it, you know, the linguists watching it, you know. Like they're like, oh, this is actually trying to be realistic.
Absolutely.
That's quite good.
Yeah.
So anyway, so he hooks up with Denis Villeneuve, who gets the Blade Runner 2049, bearing in mind it had been a long time since the original, which was one of those hallowed films that was like, anybody taking on this film is taking a big, big chance, because Blade Runner outgrew all of its initial means in terms of the affection in which it's held. You know, it's like, it is a bit like Star Wars or Alien, or it's, you know, it's iconic. The original Terminator, you know, it's just iconic film of that generation. And so in July, he was announced, shall we say, on August 2016. He actually did some interviews, and I'll talk about one of them in a second, about being on the project. And then in July 2017, it was actually reported that Hans Zimmer and Benjamin Wallfisch, I think it is, would take over as the film's primary composers, with Jóhannsson now being sort of relegated to a supporting role. And then later that year in August, it was reported that all of his contributions to the score had been removed. And when people like Pitchfork and such like reached out for comment, his representatives said, unfortunately, due to legal non-disclosure agreements, that Jóhann signed were not able to speak about this film at all. In an interview with Screen Rant, Denis Villeneuve explained the decision as being due to a wish to recapture more of Vangelis's magic from the original. Does that tell us that he feels JJ was being unable? JJ was unwilling or unable. We don't know. Denis Villeneuve has also said, making movies is a laboratory. It's an artistic process. You cannot plan things. Jóhann Jóhannsson is one of my favourite composers alive today. He's a very strong artist, but the movie needed something different, and I needed to go back to something closer to Vangelis.
I mean,
Jóhann and I decided that I will need to go in another direction. That's what I will say. I hope I have the chance to work with him again because I think he's really a fantastic composer. Now, as I mentioned, personally, for me, this had an actual direct impact because we were like, whoa, what happened? I thought there was some interest, and then it was gone, and that entire soundtrack got overhauled. And so I will say, from a personal point of view, when that film came out, first of all, as a huge fan of Blade Runner, I was very trepidatious about that film coming out. But I was also really curious because this guy who had kind of like, oh, this guy seems like he's really good. What are they going to do with this soundtrack? It better be really special. And I have to say, I think the soundtrack to Blade Runner 2049 is extremely unremarkable. I think I don't know an awful lot about Hans Zimmer's creative process now. I'm led to believe that when Hans Zimmer is hired,
it's an industry.
It's an industry. It's like Hans Zimmer, a bit like, I don't know, like some of the most, famous kind of artists of this day have a team of people that work for them who write based on his remit, and he then sort of oversees the project and kind of vets stuff and makes changes. But Hans Zimmer is not sitting slaving over a computer the way that, I don't know, let's say Blank Mass.
And the way he used to.
When he's scoring, the way he used to. He's in such high demand. He's getting old. It's like this stuff is done by committee. As I understand it, if I am wrong, please comment below, attack us online as you do. But I was really disappointed because I feel like Jóhann Jóhannsson's approach to that would have been far more personal. And when I watched the film, trying to be as objective as possible, and by the way, I think it's a very good film. I think Blade Runner 2049 as a film turned out really, really well. I think it is not matched by the quality of its soundtrack. And the notion that they were going back to anything even like the originality of Vangelis is folly, because to me, it sounds quite generic.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the soundtrack that came out, the Hans Zimmer-ish soundtrack, is very Vangelis, but it's not. It's just like it's an approximation of Vangelis.
This is the thing, though. What made the Vangelis? This is the thing. Is it a Vangelis soundtrack because it sounds like synths, or is it a Vangelis soundtrack because it's so auteured and original? So it maybe replicated synth sounds, but it did not replicate any of the originality or the idiosyncrasy of the original Vangelis soundtrack. Because, in another universe, that soundtrack wouldn't have worked at all, and it would have been a bizarre soundtrack for a film. So what I'm saying is that I think Zimmer replicated a lot of the touchstones sonically, but didn't replicate the spirit of like bravery and personal investment in the product and in the project. And I genuinely, we'll never know. It's a counterfactual, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like Jóhann Jóhannsson would maybe have been closer to doing that. Now, as I said, with the Gold Dust EP, you can go and hear bits. Some of it is very thrilling. Some of it's very, very interesting music. There's a bit more electronica, as you can imagine, in there. It's quite crunchy at points. And there's also an interview he did with Electronic Sound, so a magazine for nerds, of which I'm one.
Nerd.
And they basically snared them for an interview at exactly either the right or the wrong moment, depending on your perspective. He'd just been announced for the score. People were excited. They asked him how it was going, and he replied, well, the less said the better, because we've had to sign non-disclosure agreements, and so I can't really say anything much, but I've been working on the score for quite some months already. It's a tremendous challenge to take on something as, the word iconic is overused, but it's certainly applicable to that film and to that score. You have to basically try your best not to mess it up. Blade Runner has been a part of my life since I first saw it. I'd already read the book by the time the first film came out, so this is obviously an exciting project for me to do, and especially with a director like Denis, who I think is one of the few people who could actually pull this off. And what you get is a sense of a guy who's really personally invested in this film. He describes being used. You talked about how he was so into literature, right? He was a sci-fi nerd as a kid. He'd already read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep prior to the first film coming out. He loved the first film, like immensely invested in it, and that carried through to this film. And I just feel like when you've got somebody as talented as him, as technically talented, with that level of personal investment, go with it. See what comes out. And now, Denis Villeneuve, did he make the call? Did the studio make the call? Because frankly, in my original understanding of this, it was the studio got cold feet.
That's what I read as well. Too experimental, apparently.
Yeah, but now, the more I'm reading it, the more Denis Villeneuve's trying to say, oh, I spoke with him and I said take a different direction. How much of that is management of the issue, I don't really know. It's incredibly disappointing, though, because honestly, I think the Zimmer soundtrack is competent and not much else.
It's fine.
It does the job.
Yeah.
The film is a very good film. It is not got anything like that je ne sais quoi of the original, though, with that totally outstanding, overwhelming, memorable, captivating, score that went along with it. And I just think it's a missed opportunity. So, as it happens, Denis Villeneuve, they never worked together again, him and Jóhann Jóhannsson.
There's a good reason for that.
Well, perhaps they would have, and maybe not. We'll never know. In the years since, I think what has aroused perhaps the most suspicion is that NDA that Jóhannsson signed. Now, and why that was necessary. Now, that is fairly standard, I think, with most people that are working on films, NDAs. I don't know whether it was a different NDA signed on termination of that contract. I've no idea. But it was bound to lead to speculation, the fact that he couldn't talk about it. On a slightly better note, and it's weird when you consider the film, Mother, same year, again, the year that never was. 2017 also saw the binning of JG's score for Mother, this time by Darren Aronofsky, but this time, thankfully, it's a bit less mysterious and a bit less unpleasant. So, Darren Aronofsky liked Sicario a lot, and he met JG at the Toronto Film Fest, and basically they got into a chat and discussed collaborating. And it's worth noting that Mother was Darren Aronofsky's first film without Clint Mansell on the soundtrack, and Clint Mansell and Darren Aronofsky have been a tremendous pairing to great effect, as anybody that knows that Lux, what's it called, Lux Extremis, the famous track from Requiem for a Dream, basically, that everybody covers. The composer, actually, I think he's Icelandic as well, Olafur Arnalds, posted about this subject in remembrance of JJ. He said, my favourite Jóhann story is when he had spent a year writing the score for Darren Aronofsky's Mother, and at some point realised the film was better with no music at all, so he proceeded to convince Darren to delete everything. It takes a real selfless artist to do that, to realise the piece is better without you. So in my view, Mother still has a score by Jóhann. The score is just silence. Deafening genius silence.
Yeah, I mean, that film, that's a wild film.
I really like that film.
I like that film.
It's a very divisive movie, but I genuinely really liked it.
I haven't watched it since I saw it in the cinema. I have no intention of watching it ever again.
Heavy duty. It's
hardcore, man.
You know you're going back for an ordeal.
Yeah, but I was surprised at how much I liked it, given how difficult it is.
Yeah.
Having no soundtrack was the correct move.
Yeah, it's oppressive.
Yeah.
It's weirdly oppressive without the relief of music escorting you through the film. During the production of that film, Aronofsky would ask Jóhannsson for samples of music that he could just play on set to set the mood for the crew. JJ described it as he was doing experiments with tempo, the same piece of music in 12 different tempi, as the backdrop for a scene shot over and over and over again at greater and greater speeds. And yeah, I provided him with that. I sent him that. A guy called Craig Hennigan, who was a sound designer for the film, he's explained quite a lot about it. The music that is there is really effective. It is Jóhann's music, but it's more sound design than classic score. He records all these really interesting musicians and interesting instruments, and we take those and manipulate them in different ways. When you go into the movie, you aren't going to hear a classic score by any stretch of the imagination. We'd listen and try to mimic a whale's heart with processed sounds that we made up. We'd mimic the timing and pulsing or beating, and Darren really gravitated towards that. These biology-type sounds is a thread in a lot of his movies, humans, bodies, essential life itself. And apparently in the creation of that sound design for that film, another approach was Jóhannsson playing an instrument made out of a single pane of glass with the composer Ryuichi Sakamoto. There is a musician, a touring musician that used to do this stuff as well. What was his name? He played at Sleazy's once and cut himself to absolute bits because he used to bite the glass apart.
Oof.
Played it with a contact mic. What's his name? Judge? I can't remember. Sorry, I'm sure somebody can comment underneath it, but guy was hardcore. Anyway, Jóhann said you can either strike it or you can make longer sounds by using friction mallets, which produce a ringing sound. And in another session for that film, it featured Colin Stetson, the saxophonist that we've covered in a previous show, with a microphone on his throat.
Oh, yeah.
And doing the clicking samples of the keys, not actually playing the saxophone itself. So Jóhannsson's ultimately credited as music and sound consultant on that film, despite having recorded nearly 90 minutes of score, which is a lot in scoring. He ultimately ditched most of it, albeit Darren Aronofsky spoke afterwards about the fact that the two of them were trying to use the lost music as part of an opera of the film at a later date that clearly didn't come to pass for sad reasons. And JG's own advance press notes for that, when they were doing the press tour, he said, Mother is a film where half measures have no place, and after Darren and I had explored many different approaches, my instinct was to eliminate the score entirely. Erasure is a big part of the creative process, and in this case, we knew we had to take this approach to its logical extreme. The film needed no music. So yeah, 2017 was a strange year for Jóhann Jóhannsson, and it was to be his penultimate year. But yeah, not as sad a tale. And also that year, I should add, one of his few victories could be his inclusion in the excellent series The Handmaid's Tale, which came out. He was part of that. 2018 looked like it was going to get him back on track with regards to projects. Mandy came out in 2018. He'd obviously been working on that. But Mandy came out 8 months, I think, after his death. It's a great bit of work, not least musically, as we discussed. The film The Mercy, I think it's Colin Firth is the main actor in that, came out, although that was supposedly a bit of a rockier production. That was with the director of Theory of Everything. And Mary Magdalene came out in 2018. I'm not actually familiar with that film. I've heard good things about it, but he did it in collaboration with Hildur on the cello again, and it's said to be a very effective score. The last order of business prior to his death in February of 2018 was being hired to do the score for Disney's adaptation Christopher Robin.
That's right,
that featured Ewan McGregor. But he died before getting properly started. There's one more noteworthy production I think that we should address, and you actually mentioned Tilda Swinton earlier on. She's relevant here. It's called LastAnd First Men from 2020. So this is actually Jóhann Jóhannsson's only directorial work. His manager Tim Hussam, explains it was his passion project that he worked on for years, self-funding it. Once he started getting more popular and doing bigger films, he wasn't the kind of guy who wanted a big house. He took his money, he invested it in his film, his pet project. So it was originally a live multimedia event conducted by JJ in a number of cities, and it was released posthumously as a film. The soundtrack for it was completed by his collaborator, Yair Elazar Glotman. It's an abstract sci-fi originally written in the 1930s by an English writer with a very Nordic-sounding name, Olaf Stapledon, or Stapledon, I guess it's a version of that. Tilda Swinton narrates the book of the same name, LastAnd First Men, over a monochrome montage. I think you could call it, of war memorials and statues built in the countries of the former Yugoslavia. The theme of utopia contrasts with that sort of like Tito era aspirational social engineering that went along with his kind of third way socialism that he was trying to, enact. Artistically framed, I mean, it looks incredible. It's quite otherworldly at points. It's got a little bit in common with the kind of, Arrival and 2001 AD, the kind of monolithic kind of aspect of it. The music reflects the quite disturbing storyline. It's a it's an apocalyptic thing. It's set like, I think it's 2 billion years in the future, and it's to do with humanity in this super evolved state that knowing it's about to be extinguished and sending a message back in time. So it fits with that unease and the visuals as well. There's all these sweeping pads, ambient soundscapes, but it's very careful not to intrude on the narration. Did you catch any of it?
No.
No. Well, if you do get a chance to see it, I'm not, to be honest, perfectly sure where you can see it. I don't think it's on Mubi anymore. But very impressive, very cool. It's about 70 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
It's unusual. I mean, it's not a sci-fi film in the sense of any action happening, but the story itself is compelling that's told to you, and the visuals are really quite spellbinding. Some other collabs. There's an album called Drone Mass from 2015.
2022.
Was it a re-release? Maybe I thought it was originally 2015.
No, it was a posthumous record. He's had 2 posthumous records.
Well, maybe Drone Mass was... There must have been some work done in 2015 then. Clearly he was alive when it was getting done. So it involves multiple vocalists, collaborated with multiple vocalists for this one. Compelling and quite experimental work, I think you could say.
Yeah.
Now, it's called Drone Mass, which is a cool name. It's not the one-dimensional sort of sludge it maybe suggests. Instead, I think it's really quite diverse. There's everything from layers of voices tangled around distorted electronics to these brooding hums, and then beautiful moments of kind of open space with just gently sustained strings. Quite a really engrossing album. I'll be honest, I get the feeling it takes a lot of listens to really get into it because it does go so many places and it is quite intense. But it's far from being just dark and oppressive. It's not that. It's got a lot more space to move in it.
Yeah, it's really impressive to hear him like using voice in that way.
Yeah,
which is something he hadn't really done, I suppose, and it's particularly in his slow stuff anyway. So yeah, it's a really interesting record, and I think it's a dense one for sure. Yeah. The other one I listened to was 12 Conversations with Thilo Heidsman, which is another posthumous release on Deutsche Grammophon. He invited the Echo Collective String Quartet to kind of revise that just before he died. So it was one of the last things he'd worked on before he passed. It's a pretty interesting record as well.
I think there's one of the most recent collections is piano works as well. Just an album of piano works, which is nice. It's not what I go to him for, but you can hear the skeletons of a lot of his compositions in him writing on the piano. And lastly, he has a bunch of odds and sods kind of collaborations. He's got pieces with Stephen O'Malley of Sun, Barry Adamson of the band Magazine, Mark Ammond. He's got stuff with Tim Hecker, which maybe isn't all that surprising if you know Tim Hecker. And of course, he's got more collaboration stuff with Hildur, Guðnadóttir. Again, Hildur, sorry about the messenger thing. Genuinely, I'll buy you a pizza. So I think we have to talk about his death a little bit, unfortunately, before we just discuss Orphée in a little bit of detail. As mentioned, he died February 2018, supposedly failing to answer phone calls. The police were called to his apartment, gained access, as we mentioned. Toxicology reported a mixture of cocaine and flu medication. Tributes were not hard to come by in the aftermath, including Denis Villeneuve, who was probably still getting side eyes about the Blade Runner debacle. He said, I fell in love with Johann's music instantly. In his work, there is a solemn melancholia. For me, at its deepest core, all Johann's music is about one profound question. Why does God not answer any of our phone calls? I really like that. It's a really nice turn of phrase. Yeah. He goes on, he was a true collaborator, and I felt quickly, as I was working with him, that the act of creativity would not suffer from the dance between our egos. He was a creative brother to me. It must be difficult for Denis Villeneuve, to reconcile the way that the relationship ended, and he wasn't able to make amends, if indeed he wanted to. You know, given that they'd worked so well and so closely. Do feel somewhat bad for him in that sense. We don't really know what went on, but when these things do happen, it's incredibly sad when you don't get a chance to fix it. Yeah,
I can imagine he must have felt really bad about that, you know, because like you said, there was no chance for him to mend things with him, you know.
James Marsh, director of Theory of Everything, recalled Jóhann as having an encyclopedic memory for music. He said there was never a band or piece of music Jóhann hadn't heard of. I had quite an eclectic taste in music too. During the making of The Mercy, I encountered this weird phenomenon, the numbers station. During the Cold War, Soviet agents would communicate via shortwave radio by numbers. I became obsessed, but Jóhann, of course, already knew about it and had done a musical piece with Jónsi from Sigur Rós about it. He was a very nice person. It sounds silly when you say it, but he was genuinely a decent person, and that's a good starting point for any collaboration.
Yeah.
He was a good person with a very strong moral compass, and he had an enormous amount of music within him. That's one of the great tragedies of his death. There was so much more that he would have done, so much music that was within him that we'll never hear. And Tim Hussum, again, sorry Tim, his manager, said that after Jóhannsson passed, he lost a good friend. He was a sweet, intellectual man, wicked smart, and all he ever wanted to do was make music.
Yeah.
He did. He seemed like a cool cat.
Really did, yeah.
There's a question we need to ask here, though, Mark, and we're not the first ones to ask it. A fella called Kevin Keller has asked it already. Did Hollywood kill Jóhann Jóhannsson? Sorry, it's a bit clickbaity, but it is interesting in a roundabout way to consider whether this man got into an environment that was so stressful, so high pressure, and at times so
cutthroat.
The highs were high, the lows were low. Yeah, cutthroat. That maybe it got the best of him in some ways. So this was did Hollywood kill Jóhann Jóhannsson? Is an article by the composer Kevin Keller, who they moved in similar circles. I think Johann's quite a bit bigger than Kevin, but Kevin wrote for like the Kronos Quartet and people like that who have played with they've played in Aronofsky films. So the article came out shortly after his death. It doesn't feature any new information, but it muses in the combination of disappointment, disillusionment, overwork that may have led to Johann's apparent cocaine overdose. As Kevin says in it, Johann's approach to film scoring was unconventional and often unexpected. This is what made him such a singular talent in the world of film, but it's also what made him an odd choice for big-budget studio films. When I heard that he'd decided to move to Los Angeles, I thought, is that really a good idea? And he then describes, obviously, how being pulled from the score of Blade Runner 2049 must have been heartbreaking. He muses on what he thinks is a baffling decision to invite him onto the Christopher Robin soundtrack. Kind of expands on that a bit, saying Disney certainly has a reputation for being very hands-on, and they certainly aren't known for releasing product that is unconventional, non-commercial or experimental. Under tremendous pressure, especially in the wake of the Blade Runner debacle, Jóhann plunged headlong into the score for Christopher Robin, spending long days, long nights and weekends composing the score. And I guess while it's a compelling, if not maybe even titillating line of inquiry, and there could be a kernel of truth here, it's ultimately just a bit of futile speculation. Yeah. We don't know. There's logic to it. I mean, I know people that have worked on scores. We know people that work in that industry. The pressure is immense. The disappointment is extreme when it happens. And yes, especially in his case, working alone, working under such pressure, like being locked in your own head like that, pouring so much of yourself into a project only to see it bend, it is emotionally exhausting. I can see why people turn to substances to stay awake, to stay productive, to stay active. And yeah, we won't ever really know why Jóhann OD'd. It's highly unlikely we ever do. We just have to mourn the fact that he did, and that so much future work has been lost as a result. But on the bright side, much of what he did leave us is wonderful. So I think we'll return to Orphée to finish.
Yeah.
2016. Is this the first time you'd heard it?
It was, yeah.
I just off the bat, the reason that this suggested itself is because I think it's his easiest collection to dip in and out of.
Yeah.
I think it's also his easiest collection to reckon with in general. First of all, it's got quite a digestible length as a full collection, and the sequencing feels quite natural. It's not his most challenging, it's not his most intense, but I do think it's a good way to discover if he is for you. Because if you find stuff in this that you like, there's more of all of this out there, sometimes in even more expanded form. I think Mark Mobley is a writer for NPR, also noted in one of his articles a crossover potential for Arvo Pärt fans, and I would really agree with that. And this is probably the best place to find that. I've got a few personal highlights.
Yeah.
Pick me up on them,
Go for
or any that I miss. So the second one, A Song for Europa. I think the simple ascending string arrangement gains a bit of added impact via the fact that there's a young female vocal sample. Now, this is what we were talking about with the numbers stations. It's counting in German. It's almost glossolalia. The code is effectively meaningless, but the voice kind of activates. It brings an activation to your brain, and that aspect of your brain, hearing a human voice and that uncontrollable urge that I think we all have to just decipher meaning or intent in some form. And that approach returns again in track 4.
I think, when I think A Song for Europa, if probably inspired by the title, it feels as though, it does kind of feel as though to me that the way that kind of sampled vocal is kind of buried in there, it's kind of got a mournful string melody, which has got this really aching counter melody that plays alongside it. It almost feels like you're floating in space, hearing somebody talking, hearing a sound through the radio. You know?
In your helmet, the voice and the radio.
It's really effective, and the title obviously plays into that. I think I say obviously, it's obvious to me. It may not be to anyone else, but I think the title plays into that because it does give you that.
Well, he's very grounded in sci-fi, so A Song for Europa, space travel. 2001, 2010, the year we made contact, all that sort of stuff. It makes sense. The fourth track, as I say, the one that also has that sampled effect, A Deal with Chaos, a collaboration with, I think I'm actually, no, this is the one. This is one, the collaboration again with Hildur, Guðnadóttir. This is
cello.
Almost, it's almost her episode. So, her minimalist cello kind of weaves very slowly in and out of this background fuzz, which is a number of signals so these were basically, to try and explain it a little bit better, I think it was in the GDR, the East Germany, kind of post World War II, kind of socialist East Germany. They had these stations that broadcast numbers, and supposedly the idea is that they were broadcasting code to agents that were embedded in the country, and they could decipher the code. We couldn't, but the sound of it is really quite surreal. It's dead unsettling in
very much so
subtle way. And just mixed in with this otherwise quite, it's not flashy, this piece. It's quite understated, but it does again just activate that part of your brain that wants to find meaning in it.
I think so. It's a very subtle track, very melancholic. To me, it almost feels transitional. I think A Deal with Chaos, A Pile of Dust, and A Sparrow Alighted Upon Her Shoulder feel like they're a movement together. They kind of work really nicely, maybe by design, I'm not sure. And this feels like it's very much the transition between The Drowned World and A Pile of Dust. It's still a good track. I think those other two tracks are also very, very good. The Drowned World does actually feel like, the way the piano is played in it, it does feel like water dripping. It kind of has that vibe. There's some really interesting compositional choices in that song. You've got a xylophone, and then it's augmented with electronics. It kind of submerges the original opening keyboard and piano passage, and it just kind of builds in a really nice way. It's beautiful, and he does that again in A Pile of Dust.
That's so for me, A Pile of Dust, the fifth track, is the beating heart of this collection. It's got a number of little ingredients. For example, there's a little bit of glockenspiel in it that actually reminds me a lot of Mogwai, but obviously set to a much grander, more traditional wash of rising strings. It's blissed out and euphoric, yet the tenderness of the playing is remarkable. It's a magnificent song.
I mean, the way the strings, so what you're saying there, it starts off quite sparse and lovely, then it blooms with the strings,
and the thing is, it crescendos quite early,
and then it pulls away,
exactly,
and then you're left with just this kind of repeated melody and ambient sound kind of moving around about it. And that's what I was saying earlier on, he starts to bring electronics into his work alongside the classical elements, and it works really well, and it's never overdone or really that obvious.
I was going to say it's the kind of song that could easily become quite schmaltzy,
very much so, but
he's he's written it so carefully to keep it on the right side
Definitely.
of it, I think.
It's a really moving piece, that song, I think.
In terms of like that coming back around, I think the 10th track in this, Fragment 2, is a sort of electronically blown out revisiting of that. Actually, in the way that the likes of Blank Mass might have done, it's very saturated electronics, yet following a really similar progression.
Yeah. I think another highlight for me was By the Rose and the Hinds of the Field. It's kind of, it feels just like it's got a kind of TV opening credits kind of feel to me, which I quite like. It's a kind of weird thing to say, but the lead piano melody in it is just beautiful. And I like that eventually it gets submerged into some lithe, it's a good word, lithe ambient electronics that kind of brings focus onto the strings, and then that piano melody comes out of those electronics and comes back to the fore, and it's just so lovely. It ends with like a really staccato strings melody playing underneath the piano, and it just, the way that it kind of segues and moves internally, it's just a really, really clever bit of writing, I think.
The last outstanding bit in it for me is Goodnight Day, the 14th track.
It's a great song,
is a really delicate, sort of slowly pulsing, not throbbing, because it's not as forceful as that, but it's this postmodern bit of orchestral music, which definitely does invite the Arvo Part comparisons as well.
Yeah,
the violin in that is really quite close to that.
it's quite elegiac. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
The strings feel kind of haunting, but there's also hopefulness to that song as well. The way the violin melody comes in on its own, and then it's like kind of, I think it's counteracted with, I think it's the viola or the rest of the strings as it moves on. It's just a really beautiful track. A lot of the stuff on this record is really beautiful, to be honest. I mean, a lot of people and a lot of reviews said the last song isn't the best. Turns out I don't even have that written down here, because I guess my notes didn't save properly from my laptop. Is it Orphée? I can't remember, but a lot of people felt that was an essential. It's the only song with vocals on it. So I think it's got a choir in it, I think.
Yeah, I'm not massively fucked about it. I think it's nice. It's an interesting ending, but by that point, I'm sort of emotionally winding down.
Yeah, I think a lot of this record is great, and it is, I think, of his solo records, it feels like the most auteured. You know, all of his other ones feel as though they're trying to do something, like try to expand his palette in some way, or
I think it
move
just feels
towards
like an
something.
album.
Yeah, it really does. You know, it feels like it's a considered piece of work.
Yeah,
you know,
and that's why I felt
hang on, let me just qualify that. Not that his work isn't considered at all, right? That's not what I mean. But this feels like it was composed specifically to be, this is an album.
I'm going to write an album.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I brought it to the table, in terms of like, I want people to listen to this guy, but like, how do you just pluck, because he's got such a canon of work as well. You're like, how do you pluck something? This is the one I think you could put this in your car.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it'd be a weird drive, but you could put this in your car. And yeah, I think, I mean, what are your thoughts on him? Because I mean, I've been sitting with this guy for years now, and whilst he's not my first go-to, he's consistently rewarding. I mean, that's a long time now that I've thoroughly enjoyed his work. What's your take on it, being a bit fresher?
I mean, I really liked his stuff. You know, I do have a kind of a soft spot for things like Olaf Arnold's and stuff like that, you know. Originally, I actually kind of thought that he might, like, I was expecting it to sound a bit like Neil Fram, and it kind of does in places. And that's who, when you originally picked it out, I thought that he had an album which is by Neil Fram. So it was totally the wrong person I was thinking of. But no, I love this kind of stuff, honestly. I don't listen to it nearly enough, to be honest. But, you know, I'm glad I spent time listening to his music. The soundtrack stuff, like I said, I didn't really touch it because I have a really weird relationship with soundtracks, and I don't really want to listen to them outside of the film. I'm not a kind of person that revisits that kind of stuff. I've got friends who definitely do, but it's not for me.
I think it's an interesting point you make there, right? Because there's a lot of the soundtrack stuff features a lot of the same techniques and a lot of the same moments of beauty, but in the soundtrack, you're also somewhat being driven by what's happening.
It's functional. It's very functional,
right? And it's incredibly hard to create something that sounds as relevant without the moving image. That is not to say it can. I mean, I know I've got many, many, many examples of great soundtracks, right? But had they been written without the image dictating certain cues, would they have been written the same way? In a lot of cases, they probably wouldn't have been written the same way. And so to listen to soundtracks just as soundtracks, I think it's harder for them to make total sense. That's not to say they don't have incredible high moments and otherwise, right? But this one makes more sense as an album to me, even though it still has a multitude of the same touchstones and points and techniques and signatures of his other work. It completely works in and of itself. You don't even think that there's necessarily a visual that needs to accompany it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why this one stands out to me. Another thing that I'm mindful of, and I very much doubt there are any classical music readers still listening at this point in the podcast, but maybe we sound like maybe we sound like a couple of normies in terms of classical music world, right? Maybe there are people snorting away. They like Jóhann Jóhannsson. Maybe that's like the equivalent of liking Jerry Cinnamon
Or
to
Creed.
like, extreme hardcore fans or something like that. It's like, no offense, Jerry, I respect you big time. Right? But I'm just trying to make the point that maybe there's a sort of like down their nose kind of attitude to liking stuff like this. And I think I would just suggest that as someone that's not in that world, this music has the power to pull people in and then switch them on to, I'm sure, far more complex and sophisticated artists that are further down that road. Okay, I'm not suggesting that there aren't more people that are more nuanced and, more mature than this. Perhaps this is like pure mainstream in that world, okay? But it serves a purpose. It draws people in. And I think much like we talked about in Green Day, much like we talked about in any number of episodes where we're talking about the idea of guilty pleasures, like, is Jóhann Jóhannsson perhaps a slightly smoothed over version of classical music? Well, maybe it is, but it's extremely moving. It's got a lot of thought in it, and it has undoubtedly made me pay more attention to composers, having him as a touchstone and hearing, I quite like that. That sounds a bit like, and then diving deeper into that. So if you are listening to this and you think we're a couple of douchebags, normie douchebags, an allegation often thrown at us, then give us a break. This is turning people onto a world of music.
We're just trying our best here.
Yeah, by the time I turn 50, I'll have slippers and a pipe, and I'll be all about this.
All
shit.
about it. Well, it's been good to get into the world of Jóhann Jóhannsson. It's been a very lovely experience.
He's a loss. I mean, he's a real loss, because there are so many films that you can imagine, great films that you can imagine he would have been, if not the top, certainly close to the top of the director's choice to do those films. And my experience of, Prisoners could have been a totally average Hollywood sort of like kidnappy crime thing, but it's something special. It's a film that consistently is above its peers, and he's part of why that is. And so you think, how many other films could this guy have elevated?
Yeah, totally. Well, thanks for bringing us into our lives. It's been very, very good. What have we got coming up next week? Or, sorry, in 2 weeks.
Well, the next show, let's put it that way, is going to be a bit of a mic dropper.
Yeah.
We're going to be speaking to Mark David. Mark is the head of the MVT, which stands for Music Venues Trust. And Mark has just, I've crossed paths with Mark anyway, because he's been hot in the case of basically governments, councils, anybody to try and help out music venues since COVID struck especially. Music Venues Trust really came together. There's a Music Venues Alliance as well. And they're like, it's like unionizing, collective bargaining for like help to keep an industry afloat that is really struggling and has been struggling since COVID. So Mark's there as an advocate. He's been working really hard for a long time, but recently, well, he put the cat among the pigeons on his own Substack when he published 4 excellent and some might say incendiary articles about the PRS and what the PRS does. So there you go, kids. We're going to get into the world of music administration and royalties distribution. But trust me, a bit like, you hopefully agree, our AI episodes, a bit like our Slave to the Algorithm episodes,
Spotify,
Threaten episode, going behind the scenes and seeing, PRS, what actually is that? I tell you that the musicians listening to this know about it, and they still don't know what they're meant to do to try and get money from it. Well, Mark's got some bad news for you. Chances are you might not get any money from it, or more likely the chances are Bono and Ed Sheeran have got your money.
Yep.
So Mark is going to be doing an interview with us, and I'm looking forward to that. It'll be us picking his brains.
Yeah, it's going to be class. I'm
Yeah.
really looking forward to it as well. So that's going to be in 2 weeks. So hopefully you're stick around for that because it's going to be a good one.
Yeah,
For
you'll have
sure.
to shake the tree, see
Yeah.
what falls it.
Definitely. Well, we'll join you.
By the way, PRS kind of like backhanded hate posting him, so I hope we get a bit of that action.
Yeah. Did they? Wow. Okay. That'll be class. So yeah, you can join us in 2 weeks for that. It's going to be great. See you then.
See you then.
Bye.